That's all very well, but you know, it's one thing to have clever ideas. It's quite another to do something about them. Politics, you see, is the art of the possible.
In other words, the government intends to do absolutely nothing whatever about this problem.
I think what people really want to know
The point I am making is that we have to live in a real world. Now, when we came to power, I
utterly fail to understand how the government can just continue to ignore its responsibilities in this matter.
Look, what I am saying is the whole...
As far as I can see, what you're saying is you intend to break the promise you gave during your election campaign.
Let me now turn to economic affairs. First of all, unemployment. Are you saying...
No, I'm sorry. This is an important matter of principle. In fact, if I remember rightly, you yourself said that...
But one must be realistic about these things. It's not a question of keeping promises or breaking promises. It is a question of responding to the situation as we now find it. Now, the important thing to remember is...
Can I just interrupt there, please? I would like to come back to the latest unemployment figures now.
Could I finish my sentence, please?
Yes, of course, but we are running out of time.
Now, the important thing to remember is that our problems cannot be solved overnight.
That may be so, but there is absolutely no reason
frankly,
why...
I am sick and tired.
How can you say that you're sick and tired?
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for.
Corinne, where's Sarah?
Don't know. Gone to lunch, I suppose.
Well, tell her I want to see her.
Oh, can't do that, Mr. Stenhouse.
And why not?
Because she's gone to lunch.
Well, tell her when she comes back, then.
Yes, Mr. Stenhouse.
And where's that bottle of vitamin pills that was on my desk?
Don't know, Mr. Stenhouse.
Why don't you know anything today, Corinne?
Don't know, Mr. Stenhouse. Hello? Follow through. Can I help you? Oh, yes. It's Mr. Smith. Yes. Yes. He's here.
Hello. Ted Stenhouse speaking. Yes, Mr. Smith. I did see the interview. No. Yes. An official complaint? Oh, dear. Yes, but I realize it's serious, but... oh, yes, I quite accept that, but... Well, of course, I agree with you. Yes. I'll certainly look into it. Yes, Mr. Smith. Goodbye, Mr. Smith.
You know, I feel really good today. You know what I mean? A sort of feeling that everything's gonna be okay. Well, this job, for example, it's not suitable for a man of my talents. I know that. You know that. Everybody knows that. Except Mr. Stenhouse, of course. But I'm not worried. I'm going to be someone really important and interesting. You wait and see.
Billy!
May take a little longer than I thought. Coming, Mr. Stenhouse?
Put some...
Money in my parking meter. Yes, Mr. Stenhouse.
Chancery House, Chancery Lane, London. And 30 feet below where I'm standing now are the London Silver Vaults. Mr. Dennis Frayling, manager of the London Silver Vaults and Chancery Lane Safe Deposit Company.
It is called, as you know, the London Silver Vaults, and there are 3 quite long corridors with about 126 vaults in them, the largest proportion which are taken up by people who sell silver from those vaults, i.e. shops like you would have in any high street.
How long have the Silver Vaults been here?
The business as such started in 1885 as the Chancery Lane Safe Deposit and Offices Company Limited, which is rather a mouthful, and went on like that until the wartime, and some people bought their customers down here to store a few valuables because of the bombing of the shops, etc., etc. And after the war, when the company redesigned the whole vault area, was gradually demolished and rebuilt in 1953 with these people in mind, hence the long, wide corridors with large strong rooms laid out as shops. You've got, I suppose, 30 to 40 different silver dealers down here, all selling silver, some antique, and probably mostly antique, some modern, and some specialize in certain types of silver. So you have a lot of silver under one roof.
I have a pair of wine coasters that are still plate, but not modern silver plate. They're old Sheffield plate.
But what's the difference?
Well, the difference is that old Sheffield plate was made for 100 years, from 1740 to 1840. And during that 100 years, they made the material before they could make the article. So by that I mean they take a sheet of silver, a sheet of copper, another sheet of silver, and fuse them together, and they then would form their article. You can see the seam there where they were made.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, if they were plated, like a modern pair, that wouldn't be visible. Yes. Are you with me?
Yes.
So all they were done was soldered together and then polished gently to hide that, but it never does really hide. It's a characteristic of old Sheffield.
Mainly I buy old plate. It's not as expensive. It's very interesting. The pieces are interesting. I give it for gifts. I think it makes a wonderful gift for a young couple getting married, rather than something new. It's a little more personal and a little more interesting.
Where was it? Here it is. This one here. Now, this is a Georgian silver sauce boat. It was made in 1750, in the reign of George II, and this is selling for £525.
Well, I have a shop in Northern Ireland, and I'm hoping to buy pieces of silver. Mostly silver photo frames, silver toothbrush, and some pieces of jewellery, and also some pieces from my own personal collection.
Now, this teapot is rather interesting because of the hallmarks. When we bought the teapot and the hot water pot, we bought them about 3 years ago, and unfortunately there was no cream and sugar. Now, the teapot and the hot water were made in 1936 in London, and there is the date letter A, which is the date letter for London for 1936. So we were very fortunate in finding the maker that originally made the teapot and the hot water, and we were able to get the cream and sugar made to match. The only difference, of course, is the hallmark, and the date letter there is the date letter F, and that is the date letter for 1980.
In the course of my business, I'm a manufacturer in the silverware trade. Many of the people in the vaults are customers of mine, and that's why I'm here.
What sort of things do you manufacture?
Mainly tableware, i.e. knives, forks and spoons. In the trade it's known as flatware, but most people call it cutlery. We also supply a lot of knives to the antique trade to match up to antique services, because old knives just rot and perish, and you have to have modern knives of the same pattern to match up.
One vinaigrette, which I must show you, it's a most unusual vinaigrette. I've never had one before in this fan-shaped design, and the hallmark is on the side here, and it's hallmarked for 1807. Has a beautiful grille. It's a shell shape on each side, and of course that center grille opens there to show the beautiful work of that pierced effect.
It's fantastic. Everything is here in one building.
I'm from Midland, Texas, and in the United States we don't have the marvelous selection of silvers and items that you have here, the antiquities, the older items. And so I come every time I'm in London. I just love the silver vaults.
You're not being realistic.
What I'm saying is, most of the world's problems could be solved if people really wanted to solve them. Now, take starvation, for example. There's no need for starvation in the world. There's enough food for everyone. It just needs organizing. But what do? We spend money on weapons. And in Europe, we destroy huge amounts of food every year so as to keep world prices high. Oh, it's madness.
Well, that's great coming from you, Prodip. You must spend about half your income on food.
That's not the point. It won't help anyone to eat if I spend less on my meals.
Maybe that's true, but, well, it does sound a bit hypocritical.
And who's going to change all that? Politicians, I suppose.
Exactly. Just think of those two I interviewed. All they wanted to do was make each other look foolish.
It's too easy to blame politicians. It's our own fault for having politicians like that.
Ah, politicians. Don't talk to me about politicians. Did I ever tell you, my brother was the mayor in a small town in Normandy. Well, he was only in office 1 year when there was the most terrible scandal.
So both Raystrick and Lee were lying.
What about Raystrick?
Well, he gave him an alibi, didn't he? He said he was with him, but he wasn't.
Yes.
I wonder why.
Well, they're old friends. Probably doing Lee a favor.
When Lee left him in the hotel foyer, we know Raystrick spoke to Felicity Curran. Then she went to get a taxi. Who was with him then?
Nobody.
In that case, Raystrick was free at the time of the murder as well as Lee. So maybe he gave him an alibi because that way he gave himself an alibi too.
Maybe.
So, what do we do now?
We're going to Mrs. Gibbs. I want to know who that mysterious visitor was. One in the pilot's uniform.
Do you think she'll be watching?
Always be grateful for inquisitive neighbours. If it wasn't for them, we'd never saw anything.
I suppose so.
Now,
Oh, Inspector.
We rang the bell, but there was no answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do sit down.
Thank you. Now, I know it must still be painful for you to talk about your husband's death.
I'm sorry I was so unhelpful before.
That's all right. We quite understand.
Oh, excuse me.
I think that might be for us.
Oh.
If you don't mind.
No, I'll get it.
Mrs. Gibbs, your garage was equipped for your husband to make pirate video cassettes. And yet you told us you knew nothing about it.
I knew what he was doing.
I'm sure you did. You knew, for example, that Maurice Hutchinson was supplying the material for your husband to copy.
Yes.
And who was he supplying the cassettes to?
I really don't know. Oh, except that they were airline people. Matthew used to say that they were ideal for the job. In and out of the country every day, and no one takes a second look at them.
Yes, I'll speak to the manager. Mr. Morell. Inspector Phillips isn't available at the moment, but I'm working with him on the case. Alec Lee, yes. Of course. Completely confidential.
When your husband left here on the morning of his death,
Yes.
you knew he was going to a hotel near the airport
Yes.
to distribute pirate video cassettes.
Yes. I'm sorry I lied to you before, Inspector. But while there was a chance you wouldn't find out, I wanted to protect Matthew's reputation.
Was there anything different about that morning? Was your husband worried or expecting trouble?
No,
So why did he take his gun with him?
I don't know.
12,500. Roughly, yes. Well, thank you, Mr. Morell. Yes, I realize you shouldn't be doing this. No, I promise no one will know where we got this information. Thank you for your help. Bye-bye.
Does the name Alec Lee mean anything to you?
Alec?
Lee.
No.
He's an airline pilot. As far as you know, did he ever visit this house?
No.
Did you get what we wanted?
Yes.
Oh, good. What about the name Raystrick? Bernie Raystrick. Does that mean anything to you?
Bernie Raystrick?
Yes.
You don't know?
No?
Know what? What was all that about?
I have no idea. Anyway, did the bank give you the information that we need?
He seemed very worried that someone might find out. He kept talking about the reputation of the bank and so on.
He would.
Anyway, I think he's given us what we wanted.
Tell me later.
That Bernie Raystrick?
Yes.
You do know him, then?
I should do. He's my brother.
Your brother?
Really? Raystrick was my maiden name. Bernie's my brother. There's nothing wrong with that, is there?
Well, it was a wonderful speech, a brilliant speech. My brother said it wasn't a question of money. As far as he was concerned, he'd only taken the money in order to give it to the poor.
And they believed him?
Oh, but of course they believed him, monsieur.
You mean he was telling the truth?
Oh, no, monsieur. He was telling lies. But they believed him. Did I tell you about my Uncle Francois? He was a politician too, but in a small way. Now, let me see, when was it? Yes, it was 1952, if I remember rightly.
This is the Przewalski horse, which only 20 years ago was native to Outer Mongolia. Except for the few which are now conserved in zoos, it is now thought to be extinct. Here in Marwell Zoological Park, Mr. John Knowles has devoted many years to collecting birds and animals which are threatened with extinction. Mr. Knowles, can you tell us, why is it important? Why does it matter if certain birds and animals disappear from our planet?
I think there are two reasons. The one is a very practical reason, which is that we do find at times that there is something that is useful to man in species of animals that had not previously been discovered. There is something in the blood of armadillos, for instance, which is useful in treating leprosy. But for me, and I think for most people, it's really an emotional concern. What would the quality of our life be if there were only human beings on this planet? Now, I'm not against my fellow humans, but I think I would hate to live in a world which was populated solely by humans.
What would you say are some of the main factors which threaten certain species?
Humans again. It's largely habitat destruction. It is also, to some extent, hunting for meat and sport. And if we look at these scimitar horned oryx here, they are reduced in the wild to probably a few hundred animals. And those few hundred animals live in the area of Chad and Niger, right on the border, where most of the recent fighting in Chad has taken place. It is highly likely that troops in a situation like that, with fairly fragile supply lines, will use their high-powered weaponry not only on each other, but on the animals to get some food and even just to get target practice.
Well, what can the average person do to protest against this?
Well, I think voices raised in protest is terribly important, but also money is terribly important too. And I think it's the duty of every person who can afford to provide some of their money for conservation of wildlife, either through the organizations concerned with trying to save species in the wild, or to organizations such as ours. We represent the only real hope of survival for many, many species. When I say we, I mean the institutional zoos of the world. who cooperate very closely, incidentally, on their breeding programs. The hope for the skimmed horned oryx must be in captive situations such as we're looking at now. And it does cost an enormous amount of money. We, like most zoos, are largely financed by people coming through the gates and paying for the privilege. However, to keep large breeding groups is not economic in those terms, because the average visitor would be just as happy looking at 2 skimmed horned oryx as he would be looking at this herd where there are 10 calves born this year. So we're keeping all these additional animals because we have a bigger purpose than just attracting the public. And for that reason, zoos that are running properly organized, scientifically understood conservation programs need financial support.
Could you tell us the names of some of the species that you look after here in the park?
Yes, I'll take you through a few that will be representative. Amongst the grazing animals, the skimmed horned oryx, the Grevy zebras that are in this paddock with them. There is the Przewalski horse, which is thought to be extinct in the wild. We can then move to South America, where we have Maine wolves and the small primates known as tamarins from the rainforests of South America, all of which are very gravely endangered by deforestation. Pheasants, which are endangered in much of Asia. Many species of pheasants now depend on captive breeding. And the big carnivores are extremely vulnerable. We have Siberian tigers and snow leopards here. The range is endless, but I think that demonstrates the spectrum.
Is there any difference in attitude between ourselves and the third world countries with regards to animal conservation?
Yes, I think there is, and I think we've got to recognize that the third world, by and large, cannot afford to have the attitude to conservation that we have. Somebody whose livelihood for himself and his family depends on 2 draft oxen, which are tethered out to feed in the forests at night, and perhaps are vulnerable to being killed by tigers, that person is not going to be concerned with tiger conservation, and we must appreciate that. We in this country would not be very keen on having wild elephants, or at least the farming community would not, because their potential for harm is enormous, just as they walk through fields. So there is a difference born not only of education, although that's part of it and something we must work at, but born of sheer economic hardship and necessity. And that's one of the major reasons why both the moral and the financial responsibility must lie with us in the more affluent countries of the world.
The world is losing about 1 species every day. The environmental pressure group Friends of the Earth estimates that within 20 years, at least 25% of all forms of wildlife may be extinct. In the space of a few decades, the work of millions of years of evolution may be destroyed.
It all depends on how you look at it, doesn't it?
Does it?
Yes, it does. First of all, you want me to conduct an intelligent interview. Then you run like a rabbit when some politician complains that I interrupted him.
You mustn't forget that I have to deal with the consequences of what you do. I am the one who has to deal with Smith. He's been on the phone about this twice today already.
I don't understand your priorities, Ted. I've come to the conclusion that you simply react to pressure. Anything for a quiet life,
That's nonsense. You have no right to make accusations like that.
I'll tell you what you should be worried about, and that is the way I conducted the interview. I lost control of it. I did a really bad job. That's what makes me angry. But as for a complaint from a politician, well, I couldn't care less about that.
Newspaper for you, Corinne. Help you to pass the time.
All I can say is you're forgetting your responsibilities, Sarah.
That depends on how one defines responsibility.
Excuse me, Mrs. Stenhouse. Have you seen the evening paper?
Go away, Corinne, please.
Yes, but you see, that politician who complained, he's just resigned from the government. I mean, he's lost his job. Something to do with taking money from someone. It looks like he's going to end up in prison. Oh, I love a good scandal, don't you?